Matt Brown, Extra Points, has been with us many times. Love the knowledge, insight. He joins us on 365 Sports. Matt, I want to start with this and want to get into the article you had late last week about NIL, HBCUs, and revenue sharing, et cetera. But what are your thoughts about, despite what maybe nothing can be done of what's happening with the latest news out about Michigan and one of their staffers?
I got to be honest. I do think this is an objectively funny college football scandal, which are my favorite kinds. Nobody really got hurt. You have a guy whose real name was baptized as Connor Stallions, which feels like from the Joey Freshwater school of made up names.
Yeah.
And then I can't imagine anything more Michigan than a guy potentially being busted for NCAA violations because of what he posted on LinkedIn. That's the most Michigan crime imaginable. Of course, this is very funny. What I can share, I don't think I've written this anywhere yet, but I had talked to some folks involved with the NCAA investigations and on the compliance side outside of Big Ten country, where they had been hearing about this particular investigation. My understanding is that similar to what Pete had shared earlier today, the NCAA is going to get a lot of video evidence here. I think potentially even some audio evidence. I have no idea what they're going to do. It's not. There's no precedent for this, particularly because this is such a big name program having a historical season. No one's ever faced a postseason ban or had this kind of cheating litigated before. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend this is some great moral outrage and Michigan must have their eligibility terminated immediately and Jim Harbaugh needs to be sent to a work camp in Siberia. It's not anywhere near on that kind of scale, but it is funny. and I would be very, very surprised if it turns out that this gentleman was either innocent or acting without the knowledge of higher ups at Michigan.
Yeah, on Connor Stalions' name on Friday's show, I said that Connor Stalions is not a coach. That is your Channel 9 news anchor. News at 6 with Connor Stalions and Gail Justice. That's what his name is.
That's exactly right, and it's got to be like a tier 3 or a tier 4 television market. Hi, I'm Connor Stallions here out of Wichita Falls or Grand Rapids. Connor Stallions isn't working in Houston. Connor Stallions is a little bit farther down the Nielsen rating.
Yeah, Matt. The NIL hearings last week. Yeah. The 10th NIL hearings. Does this kind of prove that maybe nothing is really going to get done? I mean, there's really no motivation for it right now, and they have much bigger fish to fry considering that one branch of the government's not even functioning right now. But it doesn't seem like there's really motivation other than using this for publicity.
We're in a really weird spot with these hearings because there are a handful of U.S. senators and their staffers who, honest to God, really do care about this and really do want to make it happen. And it isn't just the people in front of the cameras. We know that Senator Chris Murphy's people and Cory Booker's people are motivated to look into this. Tommy Tuberville's people are motivated, but I've been told there's 5 or 6 more, but it's certainly not a majority, and many of them aren't leading the relevant committees. And then to your point, it's mid-October, and it's very unlikely that bipartisan significant legislation gets passed anywhere in mid-October because we're heading into a presidential election year, and everybody in the U.S. House and a bunch of these senators have got to focus on re-election. You have multiple international crises. You have a border crisis. You have more concerns about inflation. And then, to say all of that, we literally don't have a Speaker of the House. So even if there was appetite to get this legislation done from more important people, I think the calendar is going to run out because the House is so dysfunctional right now, and the kind of people, I don't want this to get partisan, the kind of people that are likely to eventually win the Speaker's election from the House right now are not the kind of people that have a strong negotiating relationship with their Democratic counterparts in the Senate, which makes shepherding this thing through very, very unlikely.
All right, so I read the story, I think it was Friday afternoon. Was there a time when Congress was discussing NIL, and one of the ways that they could make this happen was also to help truly feed revenue in any way to the HBCUs?
Yes. So this is what I learned here. I talked to some staffers that were close to Senator Maria Cantwell, who's the head of the Commerce Committee. She's the Democratic senator out of Washington. When these Senate bills were in negotiations like a year and a half ago, there was actually some pretty broad agreement between Democrats and Republicans working on the bills about the NIL stuff. The question on the Democratic side was, some of the other non-NIL things they wanted to stick in the bill. One of the things that Cantwell's people wanted and other Senate Democrats wanted was to make sure that all college athletes could have access to post-graduation healthcare treatment for, I think, 2 to 3 years, similar to what's in the NCAA Transformation Committee. To expand that a little bit. So if you got to tore your ACL your senior year, if you're playing, basketball for Incarnate Word, that you wouldn't be on the hook for the treatment immediately afterwards. The problem was that dozens and dozens of low major Division I institutions, including many HBCUs, but not exclusively. This is also Southland Conference schools, NEC kind of schools. We're saying we can't afford that. We can't afford the insurance premiums of expanding coverage to 500 people on campus. The Democratic response was, let's do some revenue sharing from either the NCAA central office, maybe so a couple of major conferences, major programs, to help offset the premiums to pay for insurance for little guys. That fell apart, and I was told specifically because Greg Sankey works to kill it. Where the SEC was kind of taking the lead in lobbying, saying we will not support that kind of revenue sharing. That bill fell apart, and now here we are. No bill, no revenue sharing.
That is not a shock to me that the major conferences would not be into that idea, Matt.
No. It's almost as if it only ever happens in the pros. If it's attached to some major concession from labor and through contentious, bargaining, which isn't able to happen here. No, I'm not surprised that Texas A&M hypothetically would not want to give money to Incarnate Word.
Matt, I had a message on our message board, SicEm365.com, asking me to ask you about the college football video game that eventually is released and whether or not have any teams actually signed up to be a part of that.
Yes. I talked to some developers. I believe that number is well north of 120 FBS teams that have formally signed the paperwork. The expectation on the EA side and in the licensing community side is that every single FBS institution will be involved. I believe that will be 134. Will include Kennesaw State for the release for next year. I can confirm it includes Kennesaw State because I've seen what they sent in. I have all the helmets and the uniforms and the audio that they submitted to EA Sports. It's not even really a hang up, but the reason that a handful of schools haven't formally signed the paperwork yet is because they said they weren't going to do it unless the athletes could be paid. Well, now the athletes can be paid, but the contract hasn't been sent over yet. That contract's not expected to be sent over until next spring. And so when that happens, the schools will then execute the contracts. Although people at EA have told me those holdouts, which are schools like Northwestern and Notre Dame and Tulane, they've still been sharing assets. They've still been communicating as if they're going to be a part of the game. So everybody should be in the game.
All right. I saw this tweet. Do you have this up, Garrett, on Emmanuel Acho and what he said following the USC loss to Utah? Caleb Williams should consider sitting out the rest of the season. Heisman long shot. College playoffs less likely. He won't play in the bowl game. The risk of playing far outweighs the reward business decision. What say you?
Well, I am not surprised that a lot of other national commentators have responded very negatively about that. I understand where Emmanuel's coming from here, but we've had a couple of people do this, and it generally hasn't worked out that well for them. And one of the challenges here for Caleb, right, is the kind of word on this guy is, enormously physically gifted. One of the most productive college quarterbacks ever, certainly over like the last 15 years. And the kind of the potential concern, right, is he a team player? Is he selfish? Is this that's kind of the side conversation about all of them there? And if you failed with like 6 games left, when you still have a lot to play for, you could still make the Pac-12 championship game. You could still be a part of hang a banner. You would get a lot of criticism for that. if he was injured, I think people would be understanding if he decided to sit for the last 6 weeks if there was a chance he could aggravate some other significant injury. But at the end of the day, like, you play college football to play college football. Mm-hmm. And if there's an opportunity to still win a lot of games and do things that are meaningful and important and for your legacy, of course you'd still want to do that.
Do you think that some NFL teams would cross him off their list, or is he just so talented there's no way that they would put an asterisk next to him?
I think that's the kind of thing where a scout or a GM or some self-satisfied person in an NFL personnel room would tweet that they've taken him off their list and then still take him.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if Caleb Williams was the 9th best quarterback in this class, if he was a projected 4th rounder, yeah, I could see somebody, just scratching him off. But if he's the near consensus number 1 pick, he could do things a hell of a lot worse than sit out 6 games to be automatically removed from somebody's draft board. This is the NFL. It's not the Boy Scouts.
Absolutely. Matt, as always, thank you, man. Appreciate what you do. Appreciate your time with us.
Of course. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on,
Matt Brown, publisher of Extra Points, that note about over 120 and every